Right. Well, I would not want to be Jacqueline Symes because the job she has, being the Treasurer of Victoria, is incredibly tough. Courtesy of her predecessor, Tim Pallas, and a whole series of government decisions over a decade now, Victoria's debt is, I think, headed towards $200 billion. The government every year is still in deficit, so the debt is going up and up and up. The only question is by how much. We've already had an increase in land tax. You can only sort of squeeze that lemon so many times. I don't know if there are any big assets like the SEC, as Jeff Kennett sold in the 90s. I don't know if we have things like that. And so I suppose I'm wondering is, well, what do we do? Now, Jacqueline Symes is having a go at the bloated bureaucracy in Victoria. These are the bureaucrats, most of whom refuse to actually come to work. She said she wants to get rid of around 3,000 jobs, and she'll have a massive fight with the union over this. But, you know, will that do much? Our next guest is Chief Economist and co-founder of Macro Business. He used to work for the Victorian Treasury. Leith Van Onselen, good morning.
Yeah, g'day, Tom. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, I love playing dictator for a day, or in this case, treasurer for a day. But, I mean, what would you do? You've worked in Treasury before. What are there any low-hanging fruit? Are there any obvious solutions for Jacqueline Symes to try and get our debt down and get our public finances under control?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, she's caught between a rock and a hard place on debt, as are we all. Look, obviously, Victoria's got the highest state debt in the country. We've got the lowest credit rating, and the two major ratings agencies have warned that if we don't get our debt situation under control, we face further credit rating downgrades.
Yeah, I've interviewed the guy at S&P who's in charge of that, and he's made it abundantly clear that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, so it seems almost like a fait accompli. Now, look, certainly the government should certainly cut the bureaucracy heavily. So, you know, wage costs are the Victorian government's biggest expense, and wage costs have more than doubled since Labor came to office. Now, I'm not talking about nurses and teachers and fireys and police. Those people we need, but I'm talking more about the back office bureaucrats.
Yeah,
we've had enormous
just on that though, I mean, you know, the first round of sackings a few days ago was fisheries officers. You know, they're going from 73 fisheries officers down to 36, and of the 36, only 9 are actually going to patrol Western Port and Port Phillip Bay. So it seems to me they are going after frontline services.
Yeah, which is entirely the wrong approach. I mean, the bloke in the Victorian bureaucracy, I'm talking about the Spring Street type people and that sort of thing, is unbelievable. So they've had a massive blowout in the bureaucracy, and that's the area where we need to cut, because you don't want to be cutting the frontline staff. But the bigger problem, John, the bigger problem here is we've got a massive blowout in infrastructure, obviously. So, you know, as we know, this week the Auditor General came out and said we've had $11 billion blowout in, you know, across all our infrastructure projects. Classic example, we've seen the North East Link originally announced for $10 billion, now $26 billion. Suburban Rail Loop originally announced $50 billion, estimated to be $200 billion once all 3 stages are done. And unfortunately, Premier Jacinta Allen should never have ignored expert advice, and she should never have signed the contracts to build the SRL. And the problem here is, Tom, if she does cancel it, which, you know, really she should, but if she does, we're going to be stuck with massive break fees and billions of dollars in compensation, similar to what happened under the East-West Link, but on an absolutely gigantic scale. So
if you look at North East Link, which is, I don't know, probably 80% done, Westgate Tunnel probably similar, Metro Tunnel again almost finished. You probably have to finish those because they're close to being done. So even if they have blown out, you've got to finish them. Even if you had a break cost, let's say it's $3 or $4 billion on Suburban Rail Loop, would that be better than engaging in a project that, as you say, might end up costing $200 billion?
Yeah. I mean, look, it probably would be, but unfortunately, you know, there's a lot of sunk costs. So we've already started drilling the tunnels. We've obviously got hundreds of people working in it, etc. Which doesn't mean you don't do it, but it's still going to be a massive, you know, cost to us. We're talking billions of dollars. Longer term, obviously, the government should only engage in infrastructure projects that have been rigorously assessed and offer genuine benefits. But here's the bigger thing, Tom. I think in the long term, the state government needs to demand the federal government cut immigrations, because the whole reason we've got into this mess on infrastructure and we're building these hideously expensive projects is to keep up with population growth.
Yeah, but the problem is the federal government seems to love really high immigration because it gives the illusion that the economy is still growing.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. But unfortunately, we don't get any pushback from the state government. So Melbourne's population is expanded by about 2 million people this century. It's projected to expand by another 3.5 million people over the next 31 years to 9 million people. And this means that Melbourne would have added 5.5 million in just 56 years. Now, obviously, as we've just seen, the state clearly cannot afford such many population growth. We can't build the infrastructure. It's too expensive, and living standards are getting crushed. So we haven't built enough infrastructure in the last 25 years, and we're certainly not going to do it if we add another 3.5 million people. So the state government needs to tell the federal government to slow down, because otherwise we're going to have suburban rail loops across Melbourne, which are just massive cost blowouts, and they're going to put send us further in debt. We can't afford this massive immigration.
All right. Well, what about some creative ideas? So it's been put to me that the state government might be working on a plan to legalise a whole range of drugs, and they'll be legally available out of state government-run shops like, marijuana and ecstasy and possibly even cocaine. I don't know if this is true or not. I mean, is that the sort of thing? I know that some states in the US legalise marijuana to make money out of it. Is that something that might make a difference? Or do we go to Transurban and say, we will give you the deal of a lifetime? You build all of Victoria's major roads and we effectively become a gigantic toll road state instead of having the government doing it. Is that a possibility?
Well, I mean, certainly we can't actually sell anything else off, really, because we don't have any more assets to sell. I think legalising taxi marijuana is a good move, because that'll raise some revenue. I'm not a fan of basically just allowing Transurban to take control of the state, because all that effectively does is it means anywhere you drive, you effectively pay a private tax to Transurban, and I don't think that's a way forward for the state. And whether we pay tax to the state government or we pay to Transurban, we're still paying one way or the other.
So really, what you're saying is, and this is whether it's Jacqueline Symes or whether it's whoever becomes the, if the coalition wins the next election, whoever becomes treasurer, it's a very difficult task to try and rein in the debt.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, to try and unscramble the egg, the damage has been done. We've hired all these massive amounts of bureaucrats. We've engaged in these hideously expensive infrastructure projects. The state government should never have signed the suburban rail loop, but they've locked us in. And even if we break out of that, we're up for billions of dollars in compensation, as well as the billions of dollars of sunk costs that we've already incurred. So,
and we face the prospect of a ratings downgrade, which will increase our interest costs as well. All right. Well, thank you, Leith. I mean, it's bad news all around, but. See, if you're an individual who owns a house and you get in serious financial trouble, I mean, you can sell your house. It's an awful thing to have to do, but I know people who have done it. And you just have to, say to yourself, well, I'm going to rent now. And, I wish I didn't have to, but you can at least get yourself out of a hole. But it's as though we sold the house 30-odd years ago and we're back in trouble again. And there just is no obvious solution.